We should be live soon, if not now. Gang, I'm here. We're going to have one more musical interlude, a short one. All right, that wasn't as short as I thought it was. I thought, something else was lined up. I made a mistake there. As usual, hello and welcome to the second holiday Blabathon, where I'm going to read my speech again and ad-lib to it. Hopefully it will be amusing and entertaining and informing, educational. All right, where is it? Here it is. All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Am I on there like I should be? Yes, you can see me. All right, very good. The first one was easier than I thought. But after a 2-day break, well, I guess you get used to it, but there's repetition in the software. I think I'm overdoing it. I'm not even sure. Anyway, we'll find out. Because I know it's on now. Well, let's just double check and really make sure. So we get a routine here. It says it is. There it is. See it right there? That tells you. Because the dashboard doesn't tell you. Look at this thing going in circles here. Connect now. Well, I am connected. All right. Sorry, folks. That's a 66-year-old boomer trying to fit in the year 2024 almost. Anyway, let's get started here. Hello, everyone. I am Brian Kelly, a retired engineer and attorney with a background in design, construction, startup, and testing, as well as legal issues within the energy, engineering, and construction industries. I also worked in surety and fidelity bonding, including white-collar matters similar to the Bernie Madoff case, like the one I had with Jeffrey Epstein's mentor, in addition to construction cases at large financial institutions like Citigroup and AIG. The details of my background can be found on the links page I just put in the chat, along with a link to the page I am reading from right now. Both are below in the description. The subject today is called light pumping for an anti-gravity and inertial mass reduction effect. This is a concept of mine that is about 10 years old now. I am giving you a bare bones introduction today because, as you can see from the links page, I've got a lot to say and many different ways to say it. So this is just a brief and concise overview. You can read the detailed links and watch the videos posted there at your convenience. Now to the overall concept and general principles. Most importantly, and this is a big distinction, folks, this is what's different from everyone else. Most important, which may make it novel or 100,000% wrong. That's up to you to decide. Most importantly, I start with the assumption that light, the full spectrum, is the best medium for us to use to cause an anti-gravity inertial mass reduction effect at this point, and not space-time. Light is in space-time, but it is not space-time itself. I am not dealing with space-time, the vacuum, quantum foam, or anything like that. The relevant medium for this concept is also not air, and it is not water, and it is not even space itself, which is mostly just filled with light. That's all it is, but of course has other things in it. The way I see it, air, water, and space are not things that have light within them so much as they are things that are within light. So, light only, and by that I mean the full spectrum, is the medium here. Secondly, and very simply put, to achieve an anti-gravity and inertial mass reduction effect within this medium, we will mimic the phases of matter, which are in turn caused by energy levels, which are in turn caused by light. So we can use light to move through light by pulling it through the skins and bodies of a massive object, which will simultaneously cause the desired anti-gravity and inertial mass reduction effects. There's much more to it, of course, but again, this is a bare bones overview. So I can start with this falsifiable statement. one of the first things I dared to post on Twitter back in 2016, quote, light pumped through matter reduces the effect of gravity, unquote. That still holds true today, of course, as contradiction of that statement would effectively amount to nullifying the phases of matter, which may be possible as there is sometimes the oddball exception, but I've never heard of that exception. We can put forth such a general rule because we know that the phases of matter are caused by their energy levels. That is, light moving in, through, out, and around, commonly referred to as absorbed and emitted. I added around to those concepts as an object or craft encased in a bubble of slippery light is going to provide us with mitigated friction, drag, and inertia, in addition to the anti-gravity effect. We will be within things like air, water, and space, but always slightly separated and not interacting directly. This bubble notion is not unlike the warp drive bubble concepts, as some of you may have already surmised. Yeah, they have bubbles. These light bubbles can then be intensified, diminished, and shaped to facilitate relative motion with respect to other objects. So we will simply mimic the as yet unfalsified natural phenomenon described as the phases of matter. That phenomenon also generally describes what buoyancy is and the lift of gases. Solids and liquids typically don't lift, despite being comprised of the very same atoms and molecules. Here's an ad-lib. See that picture on the screen? That is a hydrogen atom. If it is in a gaseous state, it will float away. If it is in a liquid state, it'll stick on the ground and roll around like a liquid does, meaning the inertia is somewhat diminished, but it is still under the effect of gravity. If we freeze it, it's not a liquid anymore, it's a solid. But it's a hydrogen. Shouldn't it float? Yeah, if the light is pumped through it. You see what I'm saying there? So, where am I here? But gas, and it has nothing to do with density. Density is caused by the light. All right, where are we? Where was I? The phases of matter. That phenomenon also generally describes solid, but gases do lift. Because of the light pumping in, through, out, and around the molecules and atoms. That's all. We will simply harness and scale this well understood effect, and then we'll have a flying triangle someday. All right? How's that sound? Waveguides and the like can also be made to cause the same outcome with the desired anti-gravity like floating and inertial mass reduction effects. It'll happen naturally, like in an atom here, or you can make a sub-wavelength waveguide and all kind of fancy things to do the same thing. We all see this phenomenon constantly, but for the most part, don't appreciate it. It is easily observable in natural archetypes, such as when observing the differences between water ice, liquid water, and water clouds, as well as with man-made airships and balloons, and probably to a lesser extent with butterflies, insects, and birds, a slightly more speculative sidetrack that I am avoiding today because I am only addressing the bare bones. To keep it short, sweet, and hopefully effective, I am sticking to the mostly indisputable today. To debunk what I am suggesting here will take you straight back to the phases of matter themselves and how energy levels work, as well as things like basic buoyancy. Then one would have to explain away how the archetypes mentioned above exist somehow, in spite of the effect of energy levels, which are in turn caused by light. Then they would have to explain why these archetypes cannot be mimicked and improved upon drastically, especially given modern material sciences and optomechanical knowledge, because that is precisely what I am now proposing. It took me a while to do it, but the arguments for this concept are now pretty much bulletproof, and new methods to improve upon these natural processes are flowing out of the science and engineering community every single day. Buoyancy, lift, and the phases of matter are material properties that human beings can certainly improve upon and optimize. There is absolutely no reason why they cannot be utilized more effectively and improved upon drastically. Yet this seemingly obvious endeavor has not been undertaken. This unfortunate state of things is also why the concept and the general principles I present to you today are not patentable or otherwise able to be monopolized. They belong to everybody. But what is done is one thing, and how it is done is quite another. So yeah, there'll be intellectual property, but the general principle is open sourced. Since the days of Aristotle. So what I am saying is that the open source anti-gravity and inertial mass reduction process is right in your face. I'm telling you in plain language exactly what that is. It is not 0-point energy, but it is free energy. So I propose that we take this free energy and perfect the light-matter interaction in order to bend it to our will, as was done with fire and the motive power of heat in general, and which we can now extend to the entire spectrum. It is time to move beyond that narrow band of infrared upon which we so heavily rely. Rockets, fuels, hydrocarbons, explosions. That is what science and engineering are for. This is how human beings progress. So, this is where the metamaterials come in. For example, the lift of the random hydrogen gas molecules. In, say, the Hindenburg, every single one functioning haphazardly and working against each other could be ordered and purposed and vectored right down to the angstrom level. That is, optimized with metamaterials. Molecular and atomic approaches, aerogels, waveguides, photonic crystals, topological insulators, plasmonics, quasi-crystals, sub-wavelength waveguides, and maybe even some mythological, magical isotope tweaking will all likely work. But these metamaterial design and fabrication efforts must be working toward a feasible, intelligible, indisputable, unfalsified general principle. And light pumping is indeed such a principle. If we also happen to bend space-time or warp the vacuum by accident along the way to this idiot-proof sure thing, then so be it. Stranger things have happened. But in the meantime, pardon me, we are going to use those metamaterials and waveguides to capture and transfer the explosive momentum of ambient mass equivalent light, which is free. You can call it a continuous radiation pressure or even thrust from reloadable fuel until you get comfortable with the idea. Rocket fans. But just keep on thinking about those angstrom-sized atoms or sub-wavelength waveguides capturing and exploding photons thousands of times larger than they are in the nanometers, and how fast they can be made to do so. Also, internalize and understand the fact that the very medium you will be pumping through is also a highly efficient propellant when used correctly. See how that works? Did you hear me back there, skunkworks? Or shall I repeat that? Anyway, this is how you do propellantless. You see, it's the free stuff in the air that you're going through, and you're using it to go through it. See? at least for the time being. We are talking about angstrom-sized nanopumps and picometer waveguide systems that are hardwired by nature to run and keep running at attosecond light speeds and higher. That's 18 zeros per second every second since the Big Bang. If an attosecond was a second, it would take 32 billion years. Let's not get off on that right now. That's 18 zeros per second every second since the Big Bang. It is not quite perpetual motion, but those numbers will work out fine for most of us. That's time going that way, space going this way. Smush them down, you have energy density. Anyway, per square inch, those angstroms are in the quadrillions by area. That's a big number too. That's like 14 zeros, I think. And the quintillions by volume, that's 15 zeros. Oh yeah, what do you know? I put it right here. That's 15 more zeros by area, working with those 18 zero attoseconds in an already lighter than air metamaterial, such as graphene, which is simply hydrogenated graphene, which is simply graphene soaked in hydrogen. These materials can fuse those nanopumps into a solid chunk of a skin, comprised of automatically refueling nanorockets in the octillions, all acting as one. That's why it looks like it has no engine, because it is an engine. A bunch of little engines, all acting as one. It'll take a while, folks. This kind of design will start to approach optimal energy densities, which will then be compounded. I mean, how are you going to beat that? It's going to be a while to beat that. Which will be compounded with femtosecond and attosecond timescales to produce paradigm shifting efficiency. That's things like that will give you a radiant flux per mass density in abundance, petajoules and zetawatts, and are becoming achievable here and now. That's where all that energy everything needs comes from. Did I mention it's free? Pardon me. So you pull it in, you use it briefly, and you get rid of it. But if you add it up, yeah, it's megajoules and all that, whatever it is that they calculate. We'll go over that some other time. There are back into character here. There are many, many ways to look at this concept, mostly all describing the same thing. From Newton and forces to Einstein's description of the mass equivalence of light, to floating iridescent hummingbirds, to tales of the UAPs themselves, allegedly. That is why there is a link to the links above, and why this presentation has to be short and sweet, and packed with things like falsifiable but unfalsified statements, indisputable statements, and mind-numbingly large, small, and fast numbers, until people get the general idea of what I am talking about. Energy density, I guess. Bottom line. Then we can get into all the subtleties, which certainly do exist, but are not dispositive of the overall undeniable efficacy here. So basically, I'm all be telling you the way it is, not suggesting it. Nature is what it is. That's the way it is. And it has been here the whole time. The science is already there, going back to at least the Greeks anyway, and almost certainly further. The math seems to be lagging right now, though, just as it was for the Montgolfier brothers, the Wright brothers, and the early Chinese rocket scientists. As with them, the equations will have to play catch-up here, as usual. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact that physical concepts and ideas exist independently of the many eccentric ways to explain them. You do it your way, I'll do it my way. That said, if I may suggest, I will go on to suggest that equations around supercavitating bubbles and fluids within variable gravitational fields might be one way to describe this. Stop. Shout out to the SCU and that guy in Australia or New Zealand who wrote a paper on that. That's a good start. That's the way to go. Keep going. Or it might be done with optomechanical force studies for light matter interactions in a gravitational field. That's another way. The first one's like fluidics, which it is a fluid. Fluids and bubbles, same thing. Just a little different kind of bubble that nobody really talks about. But right now, there is not even a consensus on photon mass for thrust. Is there? But there's 16, there's equations for 16 strings and dimensions. But you can't give us this practical thing we need to do some engineering here on Earth, in reality. Or barely even the notion of fields of light. Yeah, okay. Or barely even the notion of fields of light in air or water where the force of gravity within is diminished. We need a light bubble in a field, an area where there is nothing but light. How does that change things? Anyway, not to get into the details here that I have ever seen. I've never seen that. Nor have I ever seen a model for point of mass deterministically controlling its own light bubble in a gravitational field. You see that tic-tac? That's what's going on there, in my opinion. If it isn't going on there, it could be going on there, and we could be doing it. Controlling it, but perhaps something like, all right, here's a big wink to the military, perhaps something like that exists or should exist for supercavitating hypersonics and submarines, because you're working on those now. Just think about it, please. But I doubt it. Is such a region of curved space less curved in that instance? Are the tensors and cones any different under such conditions? I don't know, that's your math. Are the gravitons no longer as coherently aligned, David Chester? I happen to think so. But I'm not a PhD physicist who wrote a thesis on that. I happen to think so, because it makes sense. But that is inconsequential. True, I'm a tinfoil hat on YouTube. Because I don't think anyone has ever thought about some of these things mathematically. I'm pretty sure that's true. Why would they? Well, but again, right now, as far as I am concerned, that is their problem, not ours. I don't know why this scenario isn't already on paper. Nobody thought of it, right? And barely care right now. I am here to float away at will and shoot off at the speed of light in my own cozy little light bubble, using the absolutely obvious characteristics of nature. You want to argue about that? How that is documented later is of secondary importance. True. But despite my apparent hubris, it's an act. I will be glad to help with the bookkeeping. Please just spell my name correctly. With a Y, footnote 1. That's not an act. And you have to use some of my little buzzwords. We'll negotiate. I would also like to ask somebody more mathematically proficient than myself to explain how the mass of a light entangling, and by entangling I mean in the plain meaning of the word, not the spooky action with Alice and Bob entangling. I couldn't think of a better word. It stays. How the mass of a light entangling object over time, losing its mass equivalence at a rate greater than the local gravitational field's acceleration requires, may be likened to a snapshot of negative mass. It's negative mass over time. Okay? Can you get that through your head? Negative mass over time. It's losing more mass equivalents than the mass it has in an accelerated gravitational field. It's beating that acceleration. Okay? I would tend to think there might be some math already done out there by now, but I tend to doubt it too. Or perhaps we can update the rocket equation. Make it continuous. Put the rocket in a mitigated gravitational field of its own making and wrap a slippery light bubble around it to reduce drag, friction, and inertial mass. That part you're already getting. From what my understanding, slowly. But you don't shoot lasers at the light. And you're using the surfaces mechanically to do that, I think, from what I understand. But now you're going to start engaging actively, okay? More so. To reduce drag, friction, and inertial mass. Everyone agrees with that. We're going to take that and go with it. Keep going. We're going to logical conclusions here. How do we rewrite F equals ma, which is your rocket equation relying on Newton's, when Newton never saw a balloon? He didn't live that long. How do we rewrite F equals ma for a body in motion when a major component of that body is not mass, but mass equivalence? See how that might confuse an engineer out here who is not specialized in this field at all, but looks at that field and sees it's not there? Could it be dumb luck? Just curiosity. If Elon Musk can learn it from a book, I can learn it from web pages. The thing with this is, this concept can be described 6 ways to Sunday and back. But apparently, since that hasn't been done conclusively to date, this novel concept, which is simply mimicking what already exists in nature, so how novel is it really? It's just observing it, which is good for a theory because it exists, which is simply mimicking what already exists in nature. We'll have to bring that about. Pardon me. So yes, the current lack of comprehensive mathematical descriptions is a weakness here, but that is not an obstacle. Merely a historical footnote, because the faces stand unfalsified and archetypes exist. The notion of optimization, which would involve the engineering of metamaterials in this case, has proven worthwhile over and over again throughout history, and this concept is fresh, fertile ground. You can see all of this with your own eyes, whether you appreciate it yet or not. That the math is once again lagging innovation is merely a secondary concern. It often does. Not always, but often. Fortunately, that gives other people something to do. One upside to this weakness is it will also cause people to realize that although this concept has yet to be described mathematically to everyone's satisfaction, including my own, because I still have to talk about it, it is also impossible to debunk mathematically. Okay? Because nature is what it is. No matter what has or has not been written or published about it. Look out the window once in a while, peers. And while sufficient archetypes already exist, like I just told you, this concept is indeed testable as well. I started experimenting with balloons and mirrors early on and did it for years. But for this crowd, a basic metamaterial might be necessary, starting with perhaps a homemade street corner bootleg graphene or equivalent. Think of it this way. All you will be doing is taking something lighter than air, like graphene, and making it even lighter than air by adding hydrogen to it for a hydrogenated graphene known as graphene. Then you gradually learn to control its inertia mitigating anti-gravity, in air quotes, properties. You dope it to turn left. That's lingo. You decorate it to turn right. That's also lingo. Whatever it takes, that's an attitude. Then you start building around it. Instead of a mirror deterministically reflecting the sun onto a balloon, maybe Mark Sokol chasing a piece of street graphene through the back alleys of North Jersey with Jeremiah's magic wand might be the stunt that finally opens the world's eyes. Or it might be Wayne Ojala, or it might be Josh Bertrand, or it might be me when I get done with these blab fests. Or as I suggested to certain well-known TTSA members repeatedly on Twitter years ago, you have to enunciate. Pardon me. Years ago, and it's on Twitter, put the material in a chamber and just fiddle around with the different electromagnetic fields. The electric field, the magnetic field, the electromagnetic field we call light. Now that can be confusing. Those are three different things. We call light such as, temperatures, visible light, microwaves, X-rays, radio waves, sound, or whatever frequencies you have handy to see what affects and controls it. Did somebody say terahertz in there? That's a temperature. Temperature. Ultimately, we will build around these malleable material properties of lift and buoyancy. Listen up, mainstream, which are caused by light. And optimize them. Until we are pumping light at a rate approaching the speed of light. Tell me why it can't be done. You can't. It may seem very silly and funny for a while, a guy yelling on YouTube with the magic wand, like it was for me in the balloons, a grown man chasing balloons around with a mirror. Fortunately, it was in sunny Georgia. But ultimately, this cannot not work. I'll say that again. This time for Raytheon and DOE in the back. Ultimately, all I need is a PowerPoint, right? Ultimately, this cannot not work. At some point, it is just simple common sense. But I realize and acknowledge that a few performative hoops may be desirable here. But no, it is not as awe-inspiring as warp drive, but bulletproof and idiot-proof. And 99% of the speed of light or something to start. And idiot-proof. We'll just have to do for now best I can do for you today. But I got something else coming up, maybe, after that. I can see it, but... So, take a quick look later at what I call a Philly Flyer, linked right here on the page, for an idea of what that might look like at first. I'm not pointing at you. I'm keeping my place on the page. Maybe before we get the magic wand out, something along these lines might inspire the experimentalists. But we can talk about all that stuff later. This is a bare bones overview, and it's not intended to be a deep dive into waveguide and metamaterial technology. Follow me on Twitter. You'll get enough of that to... Okay. Getting away from the prototypes and back to the archetypes, I will expound for just a moment on the UAPs and UFOs themselves. I have personally never seen one. Some of you have, and we have all heard the stories, and people familiar to us all claim to have seen the compelling data. I tend to generally believe these accounts because they describe multispectral signatures and light pumping behavior that is precisely as I would expect them to be, with the so-called glowing auras of cold light and terahertz waveguides. To me, the 5 observables should be called the 5 utterly predictables. I have a webpage on precisely that topic, in fact. But since we are bare bones here today, and that is a huge distraction, I will say nothing further about it now. You can find that link later and read it to see why I occasionally cannot help but scoff. Scoff. At Arrow and ATIP and TTSA. Scoff. And all the infotainment limited hangouts, slow roller types. The UAPs are, in all likelihood, pumping the full spectrum of light within a medium of light, just like a Virginia-class submarine pumps water, but doing so far more efficiently. Is that Occam's razor? Come on. I don't expect anybody listening right now to buy that line wholesale, except the ones that already do but won't say so. Hi, gang. But at some point, I predict that all of you will see that this stuff could not be more obvious. As for inertia, inertia means very little. When your craft's surfaces, when your craft's surfaces are not directly touching atmospheres, be they gaseous or liquid, but are instead encased in a nice slippery light bubble. There's a bit more to it in my opinion, but that gets into spin 2 gravitons and why spin 1 photons cut right through them. It's the shape of the particles. The waves, which we call particles at the point where the waves overlap and we measure them, right? Yeah. Right, settled. Which is the kind of thing I am skipping in this bare bones overview. Similarly, gravity means little to nothing to mass when the mass is losing mass equivalence at a rate greater than the local gravitational field's acceleration requires. In other words, it's losing weight quicker than it needs to for gravity to hold it in place in the form of mass equivalence, which is what Einstein said it is, and it is. You can see it with your own eyes for this function. In space, yeah, let me know when you see the space-time, what do you call it? Metric. Yeah, okay. When you can see that with your own eyes, let me know. Send me an email. That's a mathematical thing, okay? Consider the real world more often. That's all I ask. You can keep messing with that, fine. In space, you would just aim the thing at the nearest star it's rotating and start pulling light through the mass and pumping it back out at a rate approaching the speed of light. The craft will be pulling and pumping light in, through, out, and around, while maintaining its own little protective and slippery bubble or cavity. I got $10 that says that is what most of these alleged UFOs and so-called unidentified anomalous phenomena are doing. That's just my opinion. Most. Well, not all. Most or some. I don't know. But there's no excuse why we can't do it now. Are doing, but we will just have to wait and see. Okay. That wait's supposed to simulate the government making us wait. Okay, so the bottom line here is that you bottom liners, right? What's the point? What's his point? The bottom line here is that this stuff is actually simple and idiot proof. How's that for a point? It boils down to a recognition of the need to optimize an analog of the phases of matter for a certain purpose, commonly called buoyancy, or perhaps now anti-gravity. Human beings have been changing material properties since before the cave was invented. So why stop now? This milestone, anti-gravity and inertial mass reduction, is one that we have not yet fully addressed with even the most basic tools and easiest concepts at our disposal, but only with notions that, while ambitious, you're going to reach into plank lengths and pull those and rip them apart, maybe someday, are not yet feasible. So let's just admit that much. Get over the embarrassment of letting the accomplishments of the Montgolfier brothers and their progenitors languish and get on with it. Building around the inertial and gravitational mitigation properties of the light-matter interaction is a natural step. It just got waylaid for a while, understandably, in favor of force and thrust. Instead of using brute force explosions to overcome gravity, we will use the benefit of higher energy levels to free ourselves from gravity and inertia. Think of it as freeing yourself. The light in a more subtle, no more explosions. Well, maybe a few while you're getting there. That's going to be a mess. Elegant and effective manner. This approach involves harnessing and using ambient energy in real time, and it's not unlike solar power in that respect. Solar power, you're pushing electrons. With this, with photons. With this, we're absorbing the photon, using its momentum, and then expelling it. We're recycling it. But it's the same idea. You're using ambient energy in real time. And the solar power is just pretty new. Anyway, this approach involves harnessing, and I already said that. And it's not unlike solar power in that respect. So have that mindset when you're talking about he's saying free energy. There's no such thing. Well, what's the solar power you're using? Is that costing you per photon to absorb? No. You have to set it up. You have to work and cost money to build the thing that uses it. But that's getting better and better, isn't it? Pretty soon they'll be able to do that at night. Well, anyway. That's only been around since, what, the 40s? Come on. This approach involves, and it's not unlike solar power in that respect. Make no mistake, this is the hard tech play of the century, waiting to happen, folks. If I do say so myself. And I won't even mention the green energy aspect of it because I shouldn't have to at this point. I may sound a little underwhelmed about this sometimes, but I'm fully aware of those facts and just a little bit fatigued by them. Why? Because the free energy is all around us. It's there when you look out your window, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. Sorry for the cringe, but in every photon, right down to the visible light and temperature in the environment, wherever you may be enjoying this presentation. It is free. It is right there. This free energy includes the entire terahertz spectrum, by the way. You're in it, but you don't realize it. You're a fish that doesn't know it's wet, and the water is good. This free energy includes the entire terahertz spectrum, by the way, which is another distraction I'll save for later. But all that is the temperature range found everywhere in the universe between negative 459 and positive 334 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's heat. It's heat and cold. It's temperature. The universe is full of temperature. We can use it for momentum. That's what I'm talking about. So if waveguides are falling off flying saucers that do that, well, I am Jack's complete lack of surprise. So if you want anti-gravity, inertial mass reduction, and free energy, first realize that you are in fact sitting in it, Neo. I am here to tell you how to capture it and use it. To quote myself, if I may. Quote, large numbers of little things, doing little things quickly and repeatedly, add up to very big things. Unquote. In this case, the underappreciated scales and numbers in nature are far more relevant to solving this problem than our equations, at least for right now. Look at the scales. It's on the intro and outro, that thing, with the scales. It runs from the Planck length to the entire universe. And time is also maps right onto that. A Planck time, 10 to the minus 35 seconds, and 10 to the plus 26, 10 to the 20, for the entire universe, 13 billion years, whatever it is. In this case, the underappreciated scales and numbers in nature are far more relevant to solving this problem than our equations, at least for right now today. And we will be using time as a tool here. Listen up. Listen up. Of course it doesn't have an engine. Letting things just do what they do naturally at the very high speeds they do them at. Here's why they're advanced, supposedly, and we're not yet. When you set things up to do what they would be doing anyway, but so that they are doing them optimally for a purpose, hence all the fancy materials, and that is how words like propellantless and perpetual motion leave the fiction and fantasy realm to become real life. There are zeros upon zeros of bulletproof, idiot-proof, octoquadrillion, zeptoquintillions just sitting out there waiting to be used. Those tiny little things in such large numbers and at such high speeds and in such small spaces compound and add up. As anyone who has ever worked around nuclear energy or seen Oppenheimer twice in the theater, as I have, can tell you. Energy density, folks. Energy density over time. So there is no excuse why anti-gravity inertial mass reduction cannot be achieved, starting now with us. The technologies are already out there, but they are unguided, unpurposed, ignored, forgotten, and or underpurposed. I am here to get the ball rolling in the right direction by first focusing people on intelligible, feasible, and achievable concepts and then developing them. If you make it make sense to everybody or anybody or as many people as you can, then a lot of these scientific things that are happening can be put together and used for this purpose. It's a big picture kind of thing. And then developing them. I saw a bunch of stuff this morning. It's just off the hook. All right, enough. Then speaking of big pictures, let's get to the big picture of human development in the propulsion realm. And what is its past and what is its future and all that. When you are stuck with a difficult situation in life, you're stuck on the rocket equation. Stuck. You're stuck trying to reverse engineer stuff. Stuck. What does it do? I don't know. Stuck. You are trying to build warp drives way ahead of your pay grade right now. Keep trying. You might. But it's a big uphill challenge, isn't it? Looks that way. From here right now. So when you are stuck, so that you have to repeatedly reframe a problem, and it seems to be going nowhere. Sometimes you will stumble upon a much easier solution than the ones you have been trying over and over and over and over and over again to no avail. Sometimes it can be shockingly simple. As anyone who has ever tried unplugging it and then plugging it back in can attest. This is one of those times. Normally, I would call myself a simpleton here and joke about how it takes a simpleton to find the simplest solution, but not this time. Instead, once again, I will assert that this light pumping concept is the way to go now to make the most progress in the least time with the knowledge and resources we already have. People should keep working on the warp drives, gravity generation, quantum inertia, and whatever else. But again, I would assert that it is almost mindless. It's an extreme balloon or something. Overlooked simplicity is undoubtedly the best path to pursue vigorously, and that is just the base reality for now. And it can only succeed, period. How does that fail? It doesn't. This outcome will happen eventually anyway, with or without us here and now, but why not us, and why not now? At the risk of sounding defensive, the logic behind this concept cannot be seriously questioned. The physics is already out there, anyone can see it. The clouds, the balloons, with the energy levels and phases, it is what it is. That's high school physics for a lot of people. It used to be. So you can either accept that and start working toward the future or not. The math is mostly there and things become pretty obvious when considering the undeniable effectiveness and the possibilities of cascading scales of time and photonic momentum. Those numbers add up. You can't deny it. This reality is almost indisputable, despite the fact that the concept is perhaps lacking its best and most concise description with mathematical symbols. Get busy. Perhaps ironically, the engineering and fabrication technologies are both further along in those aspects because there are people unknowingly doing bits and pieces of this work all around the world right now in academic laboratories and fledgling industries. The invisible hand is out there. You can see it. But it's got to be focused. Focus, people. The basic materials for a lot of this are already out there, but their use has not been correctly purposed, let alone optimized. It is up to us, in this tinfoil hat affinity group, YouTube tinfoil hats, kooks, UFO nuts, UFO Twitter, UFO X, all that crowd, the Alt Propulsions types, to start to make that happen. Like, share, subscribe. In closing, I realize that I may not have explained this to everyone's liking as yet, and that is understandable. On the other hand, there's very little chance that this notion can fail. One way or another, it will happen eventually anyway, even if it's only a step toward bigger and better things. So now it is your turn out there. I will gladly take questions now. I will look now after this and see if there are any that I can find without canceling the internet by clicking the wrong thing, or anytime on X, formerly known as Twitter, and my YouTube or Rumble channel comments. I'm going to get on Rumble live soon at the same time as this, where other people might benefit from our interaction. Additionally, I plan on doing more shows like this, perhaps joining a few subject matter groups and further expanding my small YouTube and Rumble channels until all of this becomes painfully obvious, or I get sick of doing it. After 10 years, I consistently bore myself by thinking about this too much, as it can get repetitive and tedious. But I rarely get tired of discussing it, but I do, and the future is wide open, and it is. In the meantime, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. Jeremy, Tim, Bernie, your name here. I'm ready for questions, but first I'm going to take a breath, take a sip of coffee. I don't even know if anyone hears this. Now I'm going to take a look and see if anyone has a question, if I can find the... according to this, no questions, no comments. Notifications on Twitter. I don't see anything related to this. I hope the stream went out. Well, it shows I'm still here live, so that's good. You can't always get what you want. Whatever. I'm doing this every day anyway to keep in practice, so why not stream it? So let's go over here and see if we want to shut our face off here. Yes, let's shut our face off, turn on the music, and do an outro. So if I forget to wave, like I usually do, don't forget. There's my goodbye wave. I will see you next time, probably tomorrow. So we'll see you. Have a good day. Enjoy your holiday. Happy holidays, everyone. I forgot my outro. Oh, just pick anything. Oh, I didn't scroll down. No wonder. All right, it's holiday, so let's play holiday music. One more, and I think it's reggae. Why it lags like that, I have no idea. YouTube at the speed of light.